It's the 10th of July 2025. This is a brand new edition of Newsfirst's Primetime News, coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo, bringing you the news tonight for the Newsfirst team. I am Jaimal Ratnayaka.
And I am Hashini Patirana. Let's start off with a look at your headlines for tonight.
US tariffs on Sri Lanka reduced to 30% following government intervention, says Finance Secretary. Further discussions on tariff percentage to continue until the 1st of August. Ceylon Chamber of Commerce commends government's efforts to secure better tariff deal. Surinduta Sirasa program held in Kataragama. Thousands of devotees gather at the Kataragama sacred grounds. Final procession underway. Stock market hits historic high. All share price index records highest ever value. Tourist arrivals reach 1.2 million so far this year. Tourism revenue surpasses $1.5 billion. In your top story for tonight, the United States has officially reduced the tariff rate imposed on Sri Lankan imports from 44% to 30%. The initial 44% tariff was introduced on the 2nd of April 2025 but was temporarily suspended until the 9th of July. On the 9th of July, US President Donald Trump formally communicated the revised tariff rate to Sri Lankan President Anurakumara Dissanayake in an official letter. The Sri Lankan government has confirmed that discussions with the US will continue with the aim of securing further reductions in the tariff rate.
On the 2nd of April, during a press briefing held at the Rose Garden of the White House, US President Donald Trump announced a new reciprocal tariff policy aimed at addressing trade imbalances with partner countries. As part of this initiative, a 44% tariff was imposed on imports from Sri Lanka. President Trump explained that the decision was driven by the need to correct long-standing trade deficits and ensure a fair treatment in international trade. Following the announcement, the Sri Lankan government initiated diplomatic discussions with the US to seek a reduction in the imposed tariff rate. As a result of these negotiations, President Trump issued a formal letter yesterday confirming a 14% reduction in the tariff rate, bringing it down to 30%. In the letter, the US president highlighted the persistent trade imbalance between the two countries, attributing it to Sri Lanka's tariff and non-tariff barriers as well as other trade restrictions. He stated that these factors have hindered the development of a mutually beneficial economic relationship. The letter also noted that the new tariffs were necessary to address continuous trade deficits, which pose a threat to US economic interests and national security. However, President Trump offered encouragement to Sri Lankan businesses, promising expedited approvals for companies that choose to establish operations within the United States. Despite the reduction, President Trump issued a warning: if Sri Lanka responds to the new tariff rate by increasing its own tariffs on US goods, the United States will swiftly raise its tariffs again. He reiterated that while the US hopes for a long-term trade partnership, future tariff adjustments, either increases or reductions, will depend on the evolving nature of bilateral relations. A media briefing was held today at the Government Information Department to clarify the contents of the US President's letter and outline the Sri Lankan government's position moving forward.
So in terms of for President Trump to put down that figure from 44% to 30% in a letter, surely there has to be some kind of, even not, if not concrete agreement. As you said, it's still negotiation. But what have we put forward as our offer to enable or to convince the US to bring down the 44% to 30%? In terms of...
Yes, I think in my view, it's not necessarily, I don't think President Trump would have looked at what exactly on the table. It is the confirmation, recognition of we have engaged in good faith negotiation and with an intention to bring benefits to both countries. So that is the bottom line of the negotiations. Once we establish this, we are engaged in good faith negotiation with a positive outcome for both countries. That has been recognized. That is, I think, the reason that they have brought down to 40%, 30%.
But is there any concrete areas that you can tell us this is what we have put forward from our side in order to...
The whole idea is to reduce the, increase more trade between two and have more market access for US and us.
So
what we are looking at is that what are the products that we can import more from the US? What are the products that we can export more to the US? On that basis, we have looked at in the consultation with the industry, we have looked at the various sectors, and we have in the discussion of whether there's a possibility of opening up the market for those products for both sides. That is what that's going on, because our intention to reduce the trade deficit and have a good fair negotiation and intention in the right direction, that this is a recognition of that effort. This is why, if you can see, some countries actually they have increased reciprocal tariff. So some countries they have reduced it. For us, they have reduced it highest margin for us.
I think based on the policy directions of the government, and it is important in any event for us to explore new markets, diversify our product portfolio, the offering that we had to the international market. So that's a continuation, the process that we have started. There are state agencies, for example, Export Development Board is dedicated to look into new markets, wherever possible, increase our share in the existing markets, identify new products that could be sent to existing markets as well as to new markets. So that process is parallelly ongoing, because this type of situations can happen. So as a country, we need to prepare ourselves to face on to situations and to improve our expansion of the export volumes also. So parallelly to these activities, government is anyway continuing with the efforts from the input of the Ministry of the Trade Ministry as well as investments agencies who are working together to invite new investors in order to export to new markets and to existing markets with different products, etc. That's a continuous effort from the government.
The United States has issued formal letters to 21 countries, including Sri Lanka, announcing the implementation of its new reciprocal tariff policy. This move is part of a broader strategy to address global trade imbalances and protect US economic interests. Under the revised policy, Myanmar and Laos have been assigned a tariff rate of 40%. Cambodia's previous rate of 49% has been reduced to 36%. Bangladesh saw a modest reduction of 2%, bringing its new tariff rate to 35%. Thailand and Indonesia will maintain their existing rates of 36% and 32% respectively. Japan's tariff rate has been increased from 24% to 25%, and Malaysia also experienced an upward adjustment. It is believed that the apparel sector will be among the most affected by these changes. Currently, the top apparel exporters to the US face the following tariff rates: China 51%, Vietnam 20%, following an agreement to provide full market access to US goods without imposing any tariffs in return, and Bangladesh 35%, Indonesia 32%, Cambodia 36%. Tariff rates for India and Pakistan have not yet been announced.
From 44 to 30 is obviously a very significant reduction. But as you also mentioned, what is more important is the competitiveness with other countries. So what are the countries you consider to be your main competitors in the US market?
So of the composition of goods that we export to the US now, after 3.5 billion, almost about 2 billion is garments. So we think our biggest competition for garments is coming from countries like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia. That is for mass market products. But Sri Lankan garments is a niche market. So to that extent, therefore we have some level of protection in terms of the duty and the pricing structure. But still overall, our competition comes from those countries. And that is why we need to make sure that the tariff structure that we get is competitive with those countries for us to remain competitive to the US market.
So Bangladesh is 35%.
Yes.
So, but your problem is basically Vietnam 20 and India currently 26, but we don't know whether it will go up or down. So
that is why, as the Secretary mentioned, we have not stopped at 30%. In fact, it's a daily discussion. Next week, we are engaging back with the USTR and the discussion is ongoing. And our intention is to see that Sri Lanka gets the best rate. And our ambassador there is working 24 hours. Our team here works constantly on this. So our target is to bring it down below what has been proposed. So that is what the letters is open, saying how you continue the negotiation. So we have to see what we offer, what we take from this. So it's a balancing act that we have to take forward.
To add on to that one, that is not only to Sri Lanka, so all the other countries as well. This is why it's important to look at it not in isolation, but that entire regional comparison also how it has impacted the regional players. As a result, what is our competitive position going forward?
සාමාන්‍යයෙන් දැන් අපි ඇමරිකාවට පනවන බදු ගැන ගද්දි 180ක් විතර බදු පැනවීමක් කරනවා. මේක අපි අඩු කර ගැනීමක් සිදු කරලා තියෙනවද? ඒකත් තාම සාකච්ඡා මට්ටමේ තියෙන්නේ.
180ක් කියන එක වැරදි නම්බරයක්. ඒක අර
Please note, the figure of 88% is incorrect. That number is based on the trade deficit, not the actual tariff rate. What we apply to US imports is the standard import duty, similar to what we apply to goods from other countries. So that needs to be clarified.
අනයන බදු ප්‍රමාණය එහෙමයි තියෙන්නේ.
තුමාගේ ලිපියේ සඳහන් වෙනවා මේ ලංකාව ඉදිරියේදී බදු ඉහළ දැමීමක් සිදු කරොත් මේ ගැන අපව මේ 130 බද්ද ඉහළ දම්මන බවට ඒ ගැන ඔබතුමාලා මොන විදිය තැනකද ඉන්නේ?
ඒ ලියුම එහෙම තමයි ඔක්කොම රටවල ලියලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් අපි එහෙම බලාපොරොත්තුවක් නැහැ ඒක රිටැලියේට් කරන්න.
දැනට තියෙන බදු ප්‍රමාණයට මේ 130ක් එකතු වීමක් වෙන්නේ කියලා. එහෙමද වෙන්නේ? එහෙම නැත්නම් 130 විතරද බදු අපිට මේ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ?
එකතු වීමක් තියෙන. දැන් තියෙන බදු වලට 131ක් වෙනවා.
හැම රටකටම.
හැම අපේ රටට විතර නෙමෙයි.
ලංකාවට විතරක් තියෙන තත්වයක් නෙමෙයි මේක. අපි globally මේක බලන්න ඕන.
This is not a situation unique to Sri Lanka. We need to look at this globally. Other countries in the region are also experiencing similar additions. Once these are added, the goods exported from Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh and Vietnam will all be subject to the same adjustments. That's clear, isn't it? After these additions, our hope is to maintain Sri Lanka's competitiveness in the global market. Based on the available data, the reduction we received is relatively favorable compared to the tariff levels applied to similar industries in the region. Our goal is to continue these discussions and ensure that Sri Lanka retains its competitive edge in international trade.
ලංකාවට තිබුණු ජාත්‍යන්තරයේ තිබුණු තරංගකාරී තත්ත්වය ආරක්ෂා කරගෙන ඉදිරියට යාම තමයි ඒ තුලින් බලාපොරොත්තුව.
We have consistently highlighted the potential impact of the United States' new tariff policy for over 3 weeks. At this juncture, it is essential that we approach the situation with wisdom, both as a nation and as people. What we are witnessing is not a one-time event, but part of a broader process. Yesterday's development was just one phase of that journey. As a country, we have successfully negotiated a reduction in the tariff rate from 44% down to 30%. Moreover, we now have a valuable window of opportunity to continue discussions until the 1st of August. It is within this context that our progress thus far must be understood. A special discussion on the new tariff policy imposed by the United States was held this morning at the Presidential Secretariat between President Anura Kumara Dissanayake and a delegation representing Sri Lanka. Participating in the discussion were Minister of Labour and Deputy Minister of Economic Development Dr. Anil Jayant Fernando, Secretary to the Ministry of Finance Dr. Harshana Surya Peruma, Governor of the Central Bank Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Secretary to the Ministry of Trade, Commerce, Food Security and Cooperative Development K.A. Vimalenthi Raja, and Senior Economic Advisor to the President Duminda Hulangamuwa. Issuing a statement, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce said the reduction in the tariff rate from 44% to 30% is a constructive and important first step by the government toward bringing Sri Lanka's tariff structure for exports to the US closer to that of regional competitors. It said the Chamber of Commerce encouraged continued engagement with the US administration to secure a further reduction by the 1st of August, especially given that several regional peers are expected to benefit from even lower rates. Progress in achieving a further reduction will be critical to strengthening Sri Lanka's position in this key market, maintaining buyer confidence and supporting sustained trade growth over the long term. The Ceylon Chamber of Commerce says they stand ready to support the government's efforts in this regard through constructive dialogue, industry feedback and coordinated advocacy. The Sri Lanka Free Trade Zone Manufacturers Association says that the recent revision of the US tariff bans marks a victory for Sri Lanka's industrial sector.
අපේ කර්මාන්තයත් බැලුවොත් අපිට ජයග්‍රහණ
As per our industry's perspective, this is a victory because the goods exported from those countries are subject to tariffs that are 5% higher than ours, so they end up paying 45%. Bangladesh is currently the second largest exporter in the world. They also have a heavy competition with us. As an industry, I think we need to approach this in a global context and act accordingly.
This is the response of Dr. Harsha De Silva on the matter.
This appears to be a promising development. In fact, the United States has imposed even higher tariffs on certain other countries compared to us. We view this matter beyond party politics. Whether it's the JVP, NPP, SJB, UNP or SLPP is irrelevant. That's precisely why we informed President Anwar in advance that if any contribution is needed from our side, we are ready to extend our support. Let's make the most of this opportunity. Immediate negotiations should begin with President Trump's team. As the opposition, we are prepared to offer our fullest cooperation.
The all-share price index, or the ASPI of the Colombo Stock Exchange, recorded its highest value in history yesterday.
At the closing of trading yesterday, the all-share price index stood at 18,161.49 points, an upward trend of 0.72%. Meanwhile, the S&P SL 20 index also increased by 36.89 points, closing at 5,358.64 points. The total turnover recorded for the day was 5.983 billion rupees.
Today is the Asala Full Moon Poya Day, which marked many significant events in the life of the Bodhisattva and the Buddha following enlightenment. It is also on this Asala Poya Day that Buddhist monks traditionally commence the period of Vas, or rainy retreat. The Sirasa Namami Poya program, organized by Sirasa TV and Sirasa FM under the theme Surinduta Sirasa, was held today, centered around the historic Kirivehera Raja Mahaviharaya.
The Sirasa Namami Poya Day program commenced this morning with a special offering named the Sambuddha Puja. Chief Prelate of Ruhunumagampattua and Chief Incumbent of the Kirivehera Raja Mahaviharaya, Venerable Kobavaka Dammindathera, conducted the Sambuddha Puja. The Viharasana discussion was held thereafter, which discussed the historic significance of the Kirivehera temple. Venerable Kobavaka Dammindathera was joined by the respected scholar Jayasena Silva for the program. The Sirasa Damsara Dhamma sermon was conducted by senior lecturer Venerable Mahavava Mahindathera, the chief incumbent of the ancient Naga Mahaviharaya in Yodakandiya, Tissa Maharama.
බුදුහාමුදුරුවෝ තරම් මග කියපු ආශිර්වාද කරපු ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨ උත්තමෙක් තවත් මේ ලෝකේ නැහැ.
The Samnasa Katikavata discussion conducted toward the development of the Sambuddha Sasana was held under the patronage of Venerable Waturakumbure Dhammaratana Thera, the chief prelate of Ratnapura Mahadisava and chief incumbent of the Kuragala Raja Mahaviharaya.
මේ සාදු නාදයෙන් ගිගුම් දුන්නා කෙනෙක් සඳහන් වෙනවා.
Later, Venerable Nitiyagama Chandimathera conducted the Sanaramara Sevana Dhamma discussion.
මේ මුළු බුද්ධ ශාසනයම පවතින්නේ සත්පුරුෂයන්ගේ අසුර නිසා.
Numerous religious programs were held throughout the day today with the vital contribution of many intellectuals, including the Basnayaka Nilame of the historic Ruhunu Mahadevalaya in Kataragama, Dishan Gunasekara.
The Perahara, or the pageant, is held for 15 consecutive days after an entire year of full careful planning. This year, the pageant holds more grandeur. We faced economic struggles, the COVID pandemic and other obstacles. But yesterday, we saw a large outpouring of people than ever before. We expect a similar number of people for today's procession too. This is indeed a positive sign of our country progressing to better times.
A Surinduta Sirasa Deva Ashirwada was handed to the hundreds of devotees gathered at Kataragama sacred grounds. Devotees received the Skanda Kumara Namaskara Yantra carrying divine blessings. It was also symbolically bestowed upon the Basnayaka Nilame of the Ruhunu Maha Kataragama Devalaya, Dishan Gunasekara. As part of the Sirasa Namami Poya program, a special evening feature titled Satpuma, an enriching cultural segment, was held later in the day. The program Podisadugen Ahanna, where young Samanera monks and children engage in spiritual dialogue under one roof, also took place this evening. The Kanchaka Puja, paying homage to the Kirivehera Stupa, was held this evening in line with the Surinduta Sirasa Poya Day program, with the participation of a large crowd of devotees. This meritorious event was also attended by Group Director of the Capital Maharaja Group, Shevan Daniel, Chief Executive Officer of MTV Channel Private Limited, Yasarat Kamal Siri, Director of Religious Affairs of the Sirasa Media Network, Dharmashri Ekanayaka, Director of Public Relations, Priyantha Vijay Singha, and Sales Director of Sirasa TV, Charmika Roshan, among others.
Newsfirst, with the people.
Sri Lanka's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tourism and Foreign Employment, Vijitha Herath, held a series of high-level bilateral meetings with key counterparts on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum, reinforcing Sri Lanka's commitment to strengthening international partnerships and cooperation across diverse sectors. Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath met Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq for discussions on deepening cooperation and strengthening long-standing ties. Minister Herath had a productive meeting with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. They discussed improving bilateral relations and creating more job opportunities for Sri Lankan workers in Malaysia. Minister Herath also met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and thanked him for Russia's continued support in global forums. They discussed expanding cooperation in politics, trade and culture. In a meeting with Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong, both parties looked at ways to deepen collaboration in key areas of mutual interest. He also held talks with Thailand's Foreign Minister Marie Sangiampongsa, where they agreed to work together on shared regional priorities and strengthen friendly relations.
The total number of tourist arrivals to Sri Lanka in 2025 has already exceeded 1.2 million. In comparison, Sri Lanka surpassed the 1.2 million mark in tourist arrivals for the entire year of 2024, only by the month of August.
The Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority states that 48,300 tourists arrived in the country during the first 8 days of July 2025 alone. India accounted for the highest number of arrivals with 10,153 visitors. Meanwhile, in June 2025, a total of 138,241 international tourists visited Sri Lanka. India once again led the chart with 37,934 arrivals, followed by the United Kingdom with 11,628 tourists. In addition, the SLTDA noted that significant numbers of tourists also arrived from 8 other countries, including China, Australia and Pakistan. Tourism earnings during the first 5 months of this year amounted to $1,543.1 million. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the country recorded tourism earnings of $1,405.6 million during the same period last year, marking a year-on-year increase of 9.8%. In news overseas, US President Donald Trump has contributed to published letters announcing individualized tariff hikes for foreign trading partners. On Wednesday, President Trump threatened Brazil with a crippling tariff of 50% starting on the 1st of August, according to a letter he sent to the country's president, Lula da Silva.
US President Donald Trump said the US would impose a 50% tariff on all imports from Brazil after a spat this week with his Brazilian counterpart who called him an unwanted quote-unquote emperor. Brazil's President Lula da Silva fired back yesterday, saying new tariffs would be met with reciprocal measures. In a letter posted on Truth Social, Trump alleged Lula is undertaking a, quote, witch hunt that should end immediately, end quote, over charges against its right-wing former President Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro, who has bragged about his closeness with Trump, is facing a trial for allegedly attempting to stage a coup against Lula. Brazilian President Lula da Silva vowed to reciprocate if Trump follows through with his threat. Posting on X, Lula said, quote, Brazil is a sovereign nation with independent institutions and will not accept any form of tutelage, end quote. This marks the first time in months another country has threatened to match Trump's tariff threat. Unlike the 21 other countries that have received letters from Trump this week, Brazil ran a $6.8 billion trade deficit with the US last year, meaning the US exported more goods to there than imported it from there. Imports from Brazil to the US have faced a minimum of 10% tariff since Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs in April. The baseline rate he has applied to most goods from most countries during the 90-day negotiation period, which has now been extended to August 1st. According to US Census Bureau data, top US exports to the South American country last year included aircraft and spacecraft, fuel, industrial machinery like nuclear reactors, and electrical equipment. Therefore, a 50% Brazilian tariff on American goods could severely harm these industries.
Yemen's Houthi rebels have begun a new, more violent campaign of attacks targeting ships in the Red Sea, sinking 2 of them and killing some of their crew.
The assaults represent the latest chapter of the rebels' campaign against shipping over the Israel-Hamas war. They also come as Yemen's nearly decade-long war drags on in the Arab world's poorest country without any sign of stopping. A European naval mission says 10 crew members have been rescued and at least 3 others killed after a cargo ship was attacked by Yemen's Houthis and sank in the Red Sea. According to the UK Maritime Trade Operations Agency, the Liberian-flagged Greek-operated Eternity Sea was carrying 25 crew when it sustained significant damage and lost all propulsion after being hit by rocket-propelled grenades fired by small boats on Monday. The attack continued on Tuesday and search-rescue operations commenced overnight. The Iran-backed Houthis said they attacked Eternity Sea because it was heading to Israel and that they took an unspecified number of crew to a safe location. The US Embassy in Yemen said the Houthis had kidnapped many surviving crew members and called for their immediate release. Authorities in the Philippines said 21 of the crew were citizens. Another of them is a Russian national who was severely wounded in the attack and lost a leg. The EU's naval mission in the Red Sea, Operation Aspides, said 4 people rescued last night, included 3 Filipinos and 1 Greek citizen, bringing the total rescued to 10.
In sports news here at home, the first T20 encounter of the 3-match series between hosts Sri Lanka and Bangladesh is currently underway at the Pallekele International Cricket Stadium. Sri Lanka won the toss and invited visitors Bangladesh to bat first. Bangladesh scored 154 runs for the loss of 5 wickets in their allotted 20 overs, and in reply Sri Lanka are currently on 101 runs for the loss of 1 wicket in 9 overs, chasing 155 for victory.
Good hit, the first boundary. And the pressure on, and not the ball, not the... Sri Lanka Odia.
140 on a good day.
Yorker attempted and straight away. This is the seam to face. Once they get the rhythm going, they run over. And now that's close, and that's been given.
Goes high. This should be taken at long off. It was the bottom hand and a very good catch.
Always Hossein Imam who's gone for 30, but
goes for the slog sweep.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News for tonight.
Thank you for watching. Good night.